What's up, everyone? NanMan back with some more Magic action, but not modern this time around. This is our special Saturday release, the end of the month Saturday, which means that it is non-modern gameplay action for you to be able to enjoy. And we've got a special one for you. This is some DanDan action. Have you ever seen DanDan? Have you ever played DanDan? It is a 80 card shared deck. They recently had the secret lair that got released. I was lucky enough to have a buddy of mine, Ruben, who was off that day and was able to sit in queue, was able to pick up one for himself and one for me, because being a teacher, it becomes very difficult to get some of these awesome secret lairs. So I was very happy to get it. I've played it a few times now with my buddy Ruben, and this was, of course, right after the secret lair came out, and these were two of our players at the shop that were kind of going over things. Comes this nice little packet with just sort of like information about, okay, here's how it goes with like the mulligans, and it's like, hey, if you can reveal your hand if you have like fewer than 2 lands, or you have too many, not enough spells, you have too many lands, and you get a free mulligan. Otherwise, mulligan rules apply as normal. And being a shared deck, things like this Halamer Depths are huge, because you're not only setting up what your opponent is going to draw next, you're then setting up what you're going to draw, and then what your opponent is going to draw again. So you have to really like map it out of being, okay, I need to position myself to try to get as much advantage or get as much information here. And we've got sort of just land go from both players. There are some utility lands. We'll kind of get into those as it happens. But the 80 card list that it was printed online is great. It's just mono blue. I know there's been other variations of DanDan that you can go with, like the blue red one is it boiler work stuff, and you get a little bit more utility with bouncing your lands and stuff. But we've got a chart of course taking place here, so those setups that we just did, all those are ours. So we'll draw 2 cards and discard a card because we're not attacking with a creature. So this is going to be a lot of that sort of back and forth. How can we manipulate our draws? How can we manipulate the battlefield? Do these little nuanced plays here, and it is going to come down to a lot of this, like, setting things up as quickly as possible. But control magic's going to be the one to discard. Now, the only way to defeat your opponent is with swinging with the fish, the forgetful fish, the DanDan, and there are, hit your opponent 5 times, you win. Simple, easy, but there's ways to manipulate that with control magic. Bounce it back up, and accumulated knowledge is going to take place. Very cool card. You draw a card, and then of course any additional accumulated knowledges that are in your graveyard, the shared graveyard, you get to draw more cards. So it is going to be a lot of that. All right, we're gathering resources. We're preparing for basically a counter war here. So name a card, then target player mills a card if it is the chosen name. No, not. So I like predict a lot. I also like waiting a little bit. The way that you set it up is like, okay, we've done a setup here, or we've had a counter war, because the counters that are in here are not traditional counters. They put them back on top of the library. We get to kind of go, oh, I know this is coming. Right? Oh, speaking of which, here we go. DanDan's trying to get resolved. Memory Lapse, the counter spell we were just talking about, is going to come out. And instead of countering it and going to the graveyard, it goes to the top. But look at that art. I like the art that they have for this, whether it's the basic lands, whether it's the koi fish DanDans, whether it's the memory lamps. Like, it's so good. It's like everything about it is so good. So accumulated knowledge is going to attempt to get used. I don't like the memory lapse here, because now you're left with like they're drawing it, and now it's like you have nothing to deal with it. So like I feel like DanDan is such a fun format that we can sit here and be like, oh my gosh, it's a mistake. It's designed to learn and play and just have fun, right? You're jamming out in between rounds in the tournament like these players are doing, jamming out at home. Like I played it and got 3 games in with my buddy, and we were able to do like basically best of 3 in between playing One Piece, in between playing Commander, in between playing Modern. We just sort of like, yeah, let's just play a bunch of different decks here. All right, and attempting to do another little bit of counter action, but then Unsubstantiate is going to come out and return that spell back to our hand there. So yeah, it is now. We've gotten past the, okay, let's gather up resources. Now we're fighting over the fish. So this is a really cool thing about DanDan, and the nuanceness of it, of like, all right, library manipulation, draw manipulation, that's already sort of built into the game of DanDan, and now there is this second layer that just gets added as soon as a fish hits the battlefield, because now it's like, okay, there are now tools that are in the deck that allow me to manipulate the DanDan, whether I force you to sacrifice it, whether I take control of it with like the control magic, whether we try to bounce it. Like there's a lot of ways that we can try to go about it. Or do I just sort of go jam mode, let's just play all the fish and just try to hope I can get an aggro plan down before you're able to do all of that interaction here. Another accumulated knowledge, that's huge. I think this is the third one. Looks like we maybe are debating about Vision Charm. Okay, so Vision Charm here. Choose target land type, then a basic land type. Each land of the first chosen type becomes... I like Vision Charm less for the mill. Mill is really good, especially when you have your opponent setting up a big thing or they've just brainstormed, they just did a big setup. But being able to almost be a board wipe for the fish... of just being, hey, all of your islands are now mountains. Because when you control no islands, you have to sacrifice your DanDan. But that's, I think it's also just kind of, the more you play with it, the more you get used to, like, oh, here are the specific cards that exist within it. Bang! Big DanDan turn here. We're going to go, do you want to trade off any fish? One card left in hand. Now we get into that sort of resource management of how many cards are left. How can we get out of here? We'll do a trade here. We have a land that will let us get a creature back, but it goes back on top. So we have to play it on our opponent's turn, and that's basically a tap out mode. And yeah, that seems to be where we're at. Telling time is great. I don't know. DanDan's a lot of fun. If you did not pick up the secret layer, which sorry, a lot of people did not, consider picking up some of these cards. You don't have to pick up all the cards, but the big package of counterspell, specifically, putting it back on top, having the DanDans, that's really what you need. Right? The rest of the tools that you put in here are going to be very similar, brainstorming and things like that. I tried to do a little bit of an infect one years ago with everyone's running vines, and like there's a bunch of vines in here, and the same sort of thing, put things on top, and you're just running the Glistener Elf. But because there's all this fun element of going, I'd like to try to pump this, and you go, oh no, I'm not going to let you pump it because I'm going to use my own vines to stop you from doing that. And then we get into this almost like vines battle where we're just sort of like spamming vines of Vastwood on our creatures. So another accumulated knowledge. Draw 4. 1, 2, 3. No, okay, 3. 4. Wow. I think that's the other thing too, is like this match here is definitely shaping up to be that sort of, okay, who's going to get all the stuff? So we had the response to the DanDan going on top to become basically this accumulated knowledge. Or no, we did it beforehand. But yeah, there's the DanDan trying to get resolved. A memory lapse going to get utilized. And we're in this sort of like, okay, which blue player has the most resources here? The player on our right, player on our left. Looks like, do we want to fight? No, we're not going to fight. We only have 2 cards left. Oh, I like this. Sack to try to draw a card. Oh, this is what we're talking about. The predict moments. Okay, mill. We know it's a DanDan on top. That means I got to draw 2 cards. Now you can draw whatever's left. Oh, those are those moments where it's like, predict is such a cool card in this like specific situation here. I don't know. DanDan's such a great little bit of a mini game of itself because there's so many nuances, and playing it for the first time, you definitely learn a lot. Every time that I played the deck, I was finding new ways to interact and new things to be able to do, and new ways to kind of have that little mini game fight with your opponent about, oh, okay, if I go in this route and you do this, now we're getting into this next stage here. But Mystical Sanctuary coming out. Look at that art for that. Land enters tapped unless you control 3 or more islands. When this enters, you may be able to put when it enters untapped, you get to put an instant or sorcery on top. So now the question is, do you want to draw a bunch of cards? Do you want removal? Do you want like a tool to help you with like a counterspell war? Like, where do you want to go here? There's so many choices. we have ways to draw cards, but it's also like by doing this now, you're setting up for your opponent. So you really need the tools. Like you really need to wait on Mystical Sanctuary as long as possible to set yourself up here. But we see going to the top. That's, I believe, that unsubstantiate here. And we're going to be responding and doing a cycle. I think it costs 2 to cycle, though. I think we only tapped 1. We did. There's going to be some mistakes and little mishaps that happen here, and that's okay. We're playing DanDan. It's not that serious, y'all. All right, fish coming. Koi fish swimming. Yeah, I'm very happy with the deck. It's super cool. Art's cool. The panoramic lands are cool. Like everything about it. Telling time. Let's look at those top 3. Now, one of those goes to our hand, one goes to the top of the library, and one to the bottom. So you really have to like set yourself up. Goes, I definitely want that. So we see that go to the graveyard. That technically should be on top of the library, right? You're basically saying your opponent is going to draw this land, but a little bit of nuance, which again, that's okay. We're learning. We're not used to playing with the specific cards in this specific situation. All right, Crystal Spray going to come out here. So we're going to do a changing of the text here. Get a draw card, but we're going to be doing a nice little interaction and trying to destroy the fish.
From island to mountain.
So we say island to mountain. All instances of one color word with the other. So now, here's this little cool nuance thing with DanDan. So, there you go. Spell resolves.
This will die to state-based effects if this resolves.
It's a when trigger. It's not a state-based thing. When you control no islands, sack this creature. Trigger goes on the stack. And we're going to go with a response, magical hack, change the text of the target spell, and we're going to say this island is now a mountain while that sack trigger is on the stack.
Mountains, so I don't have to sacrifice it.
It says I'm going to have mountains so I don't have to sacrifice my fish, which is super cool. Big brain play, because I didn't think it was a state, like I thought it was state based, but seeing it because it has the word when, it is a triggered ability. And we have a response of a magical hack of our own. Put target permanent opponent controls on top of its own library. That opponent may put an artifact or creature. Oh, that works towards the opponent, not ours.
No, or permanent.
And now we're doing a double check here. It says, okay, well, I'm changing this. You're targeting your island.
Yeah.
You need mountains in play for this. It's only one mountain.
That's only one. Fuck. Damn, I thought it was only. Okay, yeah.
So there's an island on top of the deck.
Island on top of the deck. But no, that was so a little bit of nuance again. That's part of it. You also got to see the like camera shake there. Somebody bumped into the table that the camera equipment was on, so we got a camera shift there. But yeah, part of the DanDan fun is learning how these weird interactions, and there's going to be these nuance and weird stuff going, wait, that doesn't work that way? Wait a minute, that works that way? Like, but that's part of the fun, right? I don't know. How much more can I hype up the idea about DanDan, right? Like, it's so good. Oh, there we go. No, nothing to do there. So, yeah, nice little fun one for you all to enjoy on this Saturday. Of course, next Saturday we'll have some MTGO content. But, again, end of the month, we always do a non-modern gameplay. Monday is going to be our next set of Modern 2015. And Thursday will be more of our consistent Modern of present-day Modern for everybody to be able to enjoy. But hope you guys enjoyed this little quick, fast-paced DanDan adventures. But that's going to do it for us here today. Thanks so much for tuning in and watching, y'all. And I'll see you all next game.